And Zain is founder and art director at Ogre Studio, which is an indie development studio. They made Asura earlier. Maybe you might have played or known it. And they're working on a game title called Yodha. So today we are going to understand from Zain on how to optimize the game art pipeline for production. And he will be a better person to describe this. So I'm handing it over to him. Applause, please.
That's fine. That's fine, sir. Hi, guys. My name is Zain. I'd like to thank IGDC for having me at the show. And also, Shiraj, thank you for all the, thank you for all the help preparing for the talk. And before I begin the talk, full screen. Before I begin my talk, let me introduce myself. I think it'll add more context to who I am, what I do. So, my name is Zainuddin Fahad. I'm primarily a 3D artist. I got into the Indian game industry when I was 19. This was back in 2009. I moved from Bombay to Hyderabad to work as a character artist in the Indian game industry. So, So these are some of the pieces that I've worked on. And in 2014, I started my studio. So I don't have a formal portfolio as such. All these characters that you see, we worked on our game. Some of them are fan art and things like that. So as I started, as I progressed through my career, I also started dwelling into VFX and technical art and stuff like that. So these are some of the technical art stuff that I did for the game that I am doing for the game. It's not yet released. But some of the VFX, some of the shader stuff that we have been working on. Eventually, I also ended up in game development, so I code as well. So C++, C, C#, I'm decent with it as well. So in 2014, like I said, I started Ogre Studio. I worked in the industry for 5 years, primarily as a character artist. But I was looking for making PC and console titles. I was looking for an opportunity for that. Unfortunately, it was not available in India back then. So me and my friends, what we did was we started our own studio to create that opportunity. And Ogre was formed. The idea was to make games inspired by Indian folklore and culture. And our first game is Asura. It was released in 2017. It's a roguelike hack and slash with procedurally generated skill tree, basically. And currently, we are working on Yodha, which is a turn-based deck builder. And the company is completely self-funded. We pride on our independence. There's no other investors. There's no VC. There are no raising funds that we are doing. We are primarily an independent studio. So in order to raise funds in the beginning, we had to get some client jobs and things like that. Eventually, that vertical grew so much that we have been working with some wonderful clients. So we work with Warner Brothers, DC. We work with Nickelodeon. We are just an 8-person team. So we manage both, working on our own IPs and also working on these titles on the side. So what's the problem that I see? Why did I come here? What's the session all about, right? So back in 2014, when I started the studio, Unity was the more popular engine, at least for indies and developers as a whole. And Unreal was quite obscure. Technology was not that accessible, relatively speaking. And it was pretty difficult to make PC titles, basically, or console titles, especially when you're from India, basically. So this led many developers to focus on mobile and casual titles, here in India at least. When we made Asura and we released Asura in 2014, it kind of opened a lot of gates. And since then, many games on PC and console titles have been trying to release. Some have been very successful, some have been not. And Unreal and Unity really opened up, their technology, the PBR pipeline and accessibility to, meta-human characters and things like that. But I believe that these technological tools have kind of had a disadvantage in many ways. So what I've seen is that developers taking these tools, building a cool demo, and then thinking that they can create an entire AAA title with just 2% or 3% here in India. And what I've seen is that a lot of my friends and a lot of the developers I know, they start a project and then it ends up fizzling out. So in the first year, they're super excited about the project. Then in the second year, they have like the crease lines and everything. And in the third year, there's no project, there's no studio, basically. And what is also happening is that there are investors out there here in India who are not maybe that experienced in the gaming sector. They kind of fund them. And when these projects fizzle out, it kind of has a bad impact to the industry as a whole, basically. So why does this happen? There are many factors due to which this kind of fizzling out happens. But one of the main reasons that I've seen is art, right? So that's what my contribution today would be, which is basically optimizing the art pipeline. But prior to that, things like medium, like what medium should I choose for games? Like, should I go for 2D or 3D? Should I, what's my fidelity level? What's my level of detail that I would go? So I would like to give some examples of successful games that have come out that have done really good job with this. Can anyone tell me what's the game here, like the screenshot, if you can see? No. Yeah, correct. So it's basically Darkest Dungeon, one of my favorite games. On the left, you will see, I'm sorry the screen is too dark, but on the left, basically, you will see Darkest Dungeon 1, and on the right, it's Darkest Dungeon 2. So Darkest Dungeon was made primarily by a 3-person team. It's the Red Hook Studios. And their inspiration to build the game was, dungeon crawling with the psychological effects that the heroes are going through, basically. So they had this inspiration of eldritch horror, Lovecraftian horror in the game. And what they are trying to do over here is basically kind of, their art at least invokes that feeling, right? They have not gone for any PBR pipeline, any high-end technology. It almost looks like a Flash game. It is a glorified Flash game. That's what they also say, at least Darkest Dungeon 1. But they have nailed the artwork over here. And that's the idea behind why you want to produce art for the game. It's for the game's pillar. It's what you want to invoke as a game creator, not to impress your friends or the investors, with the latest technology, basically. Right? And on the right, you will see Darkest Dungeon 2. Now they had the funds, they had the money because Darkest Dungeon 1 was quite successful. They moved to a 3D pipeline so that they can, they can achieve much more than what they could with the 2D limitations that they had. When coming to the art style, can anyone tell me what is on the left? Like which game is on the left? Yeah, and on the right? Yeah. So Zelda, you can see like it's Nintendo, right? They can pull off the best AAA looking game on planet Earth, but they have gone for this kind of really nice, aesthetically pleasing 2D, not 2D I would say, but stylized look, anime stylized look for their game. Why do you think they did this? Obviously, Switch is a glorified handheld device. Like it's a glorified mobile, right? Without the ability to call. It's amazing. It's an amazing device. But that's what it is when it comes to optimization. If anyone has worked here on Nintendo Switch, they'll know the pain that they have to go through to optimize their game, basically. But still, they were able to pull off such a beautiful open world game, basically. So here in this case, Nintendo has actually tried to use the aesthetics and make sure that their open world technology works with it. So that's why they went, for the most part, obviously Nintendo has their own aesthetics, which is kind of stylized and artistic. But this look specifically was so that they could pull off the open world physics-based system that they were trying to build for Nintendo, for Tears of Kingdom, for the platform, basically. And on the right, Dark Souls 1, it's inspired by dark fantasy, Berserk. Anime is one of the biggest inspirations. Clearly, when you see that in the screenshot, you can see how difficult the game is. Just by the grittiness of it, you can feel the dread, basically. So again, the art is built so that it can serve the game's pillar. It's not the other way around. It's not just using the latest technology, right? So there is some kind of a structure that you can see over here that successful games do generally tend to follow. When it comes to fidelity, anyone again on the left? No, Hollow Knight. On the right? I don't think so. Metroid Dread, one of the best games according to me at least last year. But anyways, on the left you'll see Hollow Knight. Again, a Metroidvania. Metroidvania is nothing but Metroid and Castlevania merged together, so it's a genre. And on the right, it's the literal Metroid game basically. Again, the left game is made by I think 2 people and 1 audio guy. And it's one of the most, not most, but one of the big, successful indies that you can see out there, basically. But you can see the level of fidelity. The game looks absolutely beautiful. If you have not played it, please do play the game. The screenshot does not give it that justice. But what I'm trying to prove is that the level of detail. We try to detail our games use the PBR pipeline, use the shaders, use Fresnel, use every single technology. And we think that is what is going to make our game successful. At least that's the perception that I've seen around. But it's not about the level of fidelity. It's about what you can achieve, what is aesthetically beautiful. and what serves your game the best, basically. And also, there are other factors which we'll be discussing, but these are some of the examples that I wanted to give you. On the right, you will see Metroid, and you can see literally they use like black. Generally, you don't tend to, we avoid in game development or game art, we avoid white and black, basically, right? White and black colors. But for Metroid, they have beautifully used that color so that you can distinctly see in the Switch short screen where the character is standing, and it's a Metroidvania game. So you have to move a lot. There's a lot of exploration happening. So you can see how they are leveraging their game's pillar to dictate what the art should look like. They are even breaking the rules in many ways and have this clean aesthetics, basically, to make the game. So these are all some examples that I gave you. Now coming to my talk, which is about optimizing game art pipeline. And initially, I'll start with some more definitions, some theory. Then I'll actually open up the game in Unity, our game basically that we are building. And I'll give you a hands-on experience of what our technology looks like, how we pull off certain things. And then you can ask me questions, basically. So that's what it'll be. So what is an art pipeline, right? Art pipeline is nothing but a structured way in which your team creates the art assets for your game, basically. Now, this varies from project to project. There is no formalized, a Bible out there for this. And it varies based on 2D and 3D games. And 3D games are slightly more complex for the most part when it comes to art pipeline. But what is the benefit of following these art pipelines? So one of the biggest benefit is the art looks cohesive, right? Sometimes when you look at a game, you feel like, oh, there's something that's not matching within the game. That game, for sure, has gone through some turbulent times, if that's the feeling that it's invoking. So it's always good to have some kind of a structured art pipeline for your project, basically. Second is it speeds up the production timeline, relatively speaking. So obviously, you can't just build things out of the blue, but you still get a sense of, okay, this is how much time I'll take, like my team will take for a character or whatever asset that you're building, basically. And it also makes interdependency between the departments much more efficient and much more smooth, basically. So you have your design team, they are taking your art assets and integrating it. This art pipeline, if they also are aware of this, it kind of makes it easy for all the team members in other departments to work with you, basically. And it also helps with a lot of budgeting and timeline and things like that. And now where to begin, like to create this pipeline, right? Like what exactly do you do? I mean, all these are theories that I'm spewing out, but how do you come up with a pipeline? So this was one of the, this is where I'll get into some of the controversial stuff, basically. And this is my opinion. These are all my personal experience that I've seen working in the industry for 14 years. And this is in context with what I see in India, not globally, basically. But so before starting the game, you have to generally have a games pillar. In India, what we do is that we say that we want to build the next AAA title, and that literally becomes our games pillar. Rather than saying that I want to make a unique game, rather than saying that I want to build something that I have a deep connection with, or rather than saying that, okay, and what are those game pillars? I'm going to explain that. But generally, we have these kind of game pillars, and we should shift to what generally a games pillar would actually sound like, right? And these game pillars are your North Star. This is for your team to, everyone in the team should be following this games pillar if you want to actually see the light of day, basically, or at least if you want the game to see the light of the day, not you. But in any case, generally, I feel like the game pillars should, be around these 4 major things. It can be anything. Again, you can be out there saying that I want to build the next GTA 6, or I want to build the next whatever. But technically, it would be much better if you ground yourself and think about what exactly are you inspired by. So it can be narrative stuff. So you want to say, you want to, share a beautiful story through your game. And games are just tools, basically, to say the story, right? So you have a beautiful narrative that you want to say, and that becomes your narrative pillar, basically. So things like, if you've played Wolf Among Us by Telltale Games, or God of War 4, which is very different from God of War 3. God of War 3 was a lot of combat, it was a lot of mechanics and stuff, whereas God of War 4 is a relationship between the father and the son, basically. And if you play the game, everything revolves around this, right? There is no questions asked over there, and that's what the entire team also built up to, like the camera system. They changed everything for that game's pillar. When you talk about art games, these games are breaking the rules in many ways. They don't follow generally the structure that we see in other games. So things like Flow. Flow was by, I believe, Genoa Chen and Nicholas Clark, basically. These two founders of that game company, they came up with a thesis. I mean, Nicholas Clark came up with a thesis for dynamic difficulty adjustment as his PhD, basically. So this was basically how you could change the difficulty of the game dynamically when the character is playing, basically. And based on that, they built a game called Flow. This was released in 2011 in PlayStation. I don't think so it's available for PC. But it's a beautiful game. It's a very artistic game, I would say. Definitely check it out. So the entire game's pillar is based on that PhD thesis that they wrote. And now they are a very successful company. They have, they're doing a lot of amazing stuff. And Journey, basically, again, it's an exploratory game, very beautiful. Again, check that out. The entire game's pillar is based on that exploration, the mechanics, the look, everything, basically. Now, when it comes to tech, let's say you have invented something. You have invented a good-looking shader, or you have invented some kind of a technology piece, and you can keep that as a North Star for your game. So if you've played Noita, if you've heard about Noita, Noita is nothing. Every pixel in the game is physically simulated. So they came up with that unique tech, and then they built this game. So if you hit a pixel, it can melt. If you hit a pixel, it'll burn. It has all these physical properties, basically. And the entire game, it's a kind of like Terraria, and it's built around that technology. No Man's Sky, everyone knows it. It's procedurally generated universe. Basically, that's built. It's amazing. The technology is amazing. I have not played it myself, but the entire game is built on that, on the notion that the technology will carry it around. When it comes to mechanics, so our game, Asura, the way we were inspired by Asura was that, we wanted to build a game with procedure-generated skill tree. Okay? Being Indian, we set the game in the Indian fantasy, but that was not our agenda over here. Our agenda was to make a game with procedure-generated skill tree. So if you have played Diablo 2, and imagine that every time you die in hardcore mode, your skill tree is different. And then we based the entire game's pillar on that North Star, basically, right? Then why did we use a demon? Because when the demon dies, he resurrects, and his Janam Kundli, or his skill tree, is changed every time. So we didn't go around saying that we wanted to build the next Indian mythological blah, 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 blah. What we said was, this is our North Star, and then because we are Indians, that's our identity, and then we'll build it upon that, basically. So this everyone does, but still, prototyping, I think many people have confusion regarding prototype and vertical slice, and they kind of, at least the art department. So prototype is basically, if your pillar is not art specific, generally it's very dirty, it's something internal that you use just to see if your art pillar is substantial enough. We can have some amazing art pillar, but when you build the prototype, you actually get to know whether as an interactive piece, it's fun or not. And this is generally something that you would not want to show it outside your studio. I mean, you could show it in your, and I'll tell you why, but generally you would not use as your prototype as an investor pitch, if that's what you're planning to do, or if you're going to shows and things like that. That's where the vertical slice comes in. And I'm going to give you an example of what our vertical slice and prototype look like. Like I mentioned, I'll spew some theories out there, and then I'll back it up with some of the examples. But give me some time for that. So vertical slice is nothing but if you and your team thinks that, okay, this prototype is viable, it's fun, and it's producible, then you go ahead and you build a small vertical slice. Vertical slice, you can also call it like a beautiful corner or a minimum viable product for your game. It kind of shows the capability of your game in all fronts, basically. So in your art department, in your tech department, in your design, you try to do everything in that small piece. You don't take the entire game to do that. And then that kind of gives you an understanding of what your budgeting, what your timeline, what your whole production pipeline would look like. Now, when it comes to art, what are some of the factors that determine what this art pipeline would be like, right? These are pretty self-relevant, like they are your team size. So what kind of team size you have? If you are 2 people, please don't say that you'll build the next GTA 6. Please don't say that you'll build the next Tomb Raider. Make sure that you're sticking to your the game's pillar, basically, and see what your team experience is like. Do you have experience working on games? Generally, it takes several games to build a really good game. So, leverage your team's experience on what they are good at. If you are, let's say you're a 5-person team and most of you are tech developers, then realize that art is not something that is capable by yourself, maybe. So think about how you can leverage that team's experience to build the game. Third is obviously the budget. I'll talk about budget. Like, it's not just about how much money you have in the bank. It's also about the pipeline, basically, right? What kind of pipelines that you follow, because based on the pipeline, your budget will drastically increase. Let me tell you that Unreal's MetaHuman can build you a beautiful demo. It won't help you with the entire game. I can 100% tell you this, all right, with experience. So if you're using MetaHuman for a demo or a quick prototype, that's fine. But think about it from a broad perspective where whether your game spiller, looking at your game spiller, whether you can build the entire game with the pipeline that you have decided. And if you can't, you will have to rethink, basically. Then the timeline also. What does the timeline look like for your game, basically? And compare all this together. Compare your team's experience, your budget, your team size. And that's how, these are some of the factors that you have to keep in mind when it comes to pipeline. Last and but not the least, engines. In India, generally we use Unity or Unreal. I would encourage you guys to go outside this, look at SDL, look at SFML, look at OpenGL, look at Vulkan, and try to at least get your hands dirty if you are into tech or dev, so that you understand how Unity and Unreal works at least. But also relying on an engine deeply determines what your pipeline would be like. So this is one of the most important factors that you would want to do. And choosing an engine just because it's a fad can be a detriment. When I say fad, that means that if it's just popular and you're just using it because, oh, I'm going to make my 2D little prototype in Unreal, that does not serve the purpose. So make sure that you're taking a good look at what engines you're using. If you're using 2D as your game, if you're using 2D platform, maybe Game Maker would be much better. So enough with the theory. Some examples, that I would like to show you. So this is the prototype of Yodha. So it's a turn-based deck builder, and we took art assets from Asura, basically. So the characters that you see are from Asura. So this was the time where we are trying to figure out whether the game is actually fun or not. In many ways, how the game would look like, whether our team can even pull off the art, within the capabilities that we have, basically. So, figuring out where the UI positions would be. So it works very much like, you would say, Slay the Spire, Darkest Dungeon, and some of our own mechanics, basically. So mix both of these, and then you get Yodha, basically. But, we try to figure out whether we can pull this off, all the UI stuff, and eventually we came up, this was our vertical slice. So this is the game currently that you can play in our laptop. Obviously, there are some art assets that are still need to be done, but this is where we kind of used all our cylinders, basically. The art department, the VFX, everything. We figured out most of our UI stuff and everything, and we kind of understood, okay, if those are the cards, those are the qualities that we want to hit for our cards, this is the amount of time it will take, right? So these are the expectations we have, basically. So it has, we have been in development for 3.5 years, and this is kind of shocking to many people, basically, but we know exactly how much time will it take, and it does not bother us because we have already kind of laid the pipeline that, okay, this is the amount of time it will take, this is what the quality that we are striving for, and that's the reality of the situation, basically. So this is our concept, our illustration pipeline, basically. It's pretty straightforward, nothing too unique about it. But still, some of the things that we try to, so looking at our vertical slice, some of the things that we realized was that for our card game, the type was very important, basically, right? Now we can build, my team is experienced enough to build really realistic artwork as well, but we chose this particular art style because it was serving the game's pillar, basically. So what was our game's pillar? Our game's pillar was we wanted to make a deck builder. It had to have perfect information. So information, there is no randomness in the game. So it is a turn-based game without any RNG whatsoever. It's like chess, basically. Right? So we wanted to make sure that these two game pillars served in every way, shape, or form. And so in this artwork, you can see that the color is red, right? It's not an arbitrary color. In the game, you can increase your corruption. The enemies can increase your corruption. So we chose that as our color for all the corrupted cards. So rather than having any type that you clearly state that it's a corrupted card, we kind of just, just by looking at the card, you can understand that, okay, what it's going to do in a stat-specific way, basically. And we kind of went for this very stylized art style so that, it's actually pulled off. So it takes us about 2 days to finish one card. There are about 250 cards, so you can multiply and see how much time it will take for us to get over all those cards. But we have enough budget to make sure that that happens. But this kind of pipeline, we came up because of the vertical slice that we built, basically. It was not arbitrarily done, out of the blue, basically. The first slideshow is just us exploring the silhouette. Second is choosing a silhouette and making a final this thing. And third one is in Unity, when we have a tool which automatically takes all the assets and builds a card out of it. So this is our character art pipeline. The first concept art. And the concept art is where we kind of figure out like what the silhouette would be. So again, when we built the prototype, when we built the vertical slice, we kind of came to the conclusion that the game has to be top-down. It cannot be like, super cinematic camera, because we wanted to show enough information, because one of the pillars of our game is perfect information, basically. So we wanted to make sure that everything is visible to you and all the informations are relayed properly. There was no kind of like, there is no obscureness that is happening. And if we wanted, we could have made it look like really, what do you call it? Like very dynamic camera and things like that. But we went for that top-down camera. And because of that, we understood that, yes, our silhouettes have to look really unique from the top down, basically. We incorporated then that to the pipeline on how we build our characters. So our characters are very vibrant. So even if you see in game, it's very dark. You can see them standing out, basically, because the game is very dark. It's set in a Rakshasa, it's our own Indian fantasy world, but it's, how should I put it? It's very dark. Corruption is everywhere, basically. So we wanted to make sure that the characters' silhouettes stood out, and you could easily recognize it without reading their name. That being said, if you see our pipeline, first we use Photoshop to concept art, ZBrush for high poly, Maya for optimization, texturing, for Substance Painter is used for texturing, Maya for rigging and animation, and in-game, it's Unity, basically. Just by looking at this slide, I spend about, I think about 30,000 on softwares alone. So this kind of gives me an understanding of what a monthly, at least for a small studio like ours, we are not like a AAA studio right now, so 6 people. So this kind of software setup, that's how much it takes. So if I finish if we finish 2 characters in a month, that's the kind of costing that we are going for, just for with the pipeline that we have built, basically. So this is how kind of like the game's pillar decides what the art style is, and the art style kind of dictate our budget, and then we fit our pipeline according to that, basically. If we did not have that budget, we would not stop making the game. We would just make sure that we are not using PBR pipeline, and we would fall back to something else, basically. But here we have chosen this pipeline not to impress anyone. We thought that it will serve the purpose of the game very well, and then we came up with this pipeline, basically. I'll just show you how the character looks in ZBrush, just to give you... so even the level of detail, like we don't go crazy with the level of detail. Because again, I make the characters myself, and there's only so much time that we have. So this is one of the characters, one of the corruptors in the game. So this is kind of the, it's not showing. Yeah, 1 second. Okay, 1 second. All right, so I'll have to use it like this now. 1 second. All right, I can do that. Yeah, so this is one of the characters in our game. And so this is the level of detail. We don't go super crazy with our characters. We make sure that the silhouette is readable, especially in the top down. So our camera angle is like this. And we are trying to make sure that everything is as readable as possible with regards to this kind of a silhouette. And even the level of detail, if you see, is not that high. Texturing is also... So this is basically what we do for texturing as well. And then rest of the things is taken on shader. So we are not going for like this kind of super, detailed pores there, because it does not serve our game's purpose anyways, basically. It's not a game where you're seeing it from the first person or a third person view. And I can show you some more characters if I am able to. So this is that. Again, this is another sculpt of the character. This does not have the textures, but you can see even the fur, it looks very complicated like to do this, but it's super easy. You can use many of the ZBrush tools to build the fur, but we go for a very stylized way. Again, this takes about like 2 days to build a character. And yeah, this is the pipeline that we're using for our thing. So hope that gives some context on what our ZBrush file looks like. Now let's... all our animations are hand animated. There's no motion capture or any other thing that we are using. So Again, you can see some of the animation stuff that we do. It is top-down camera, so we make sure that things are readable very well, and try to make as unique characters as possible. So this character has like cannons. It's a scorpion basically with fire as it's with a cannon kind of a pincer that it has. And even the animations are slightly exaggerated because, again, they are very small characters on the screen, and we want to port this to Switch and things like that. So we are thinking from that perspective that even this comes in a small screen, things are readable, basically. I'll show you some of the tech art pipeline that we have now in Unity. Give me a moment, guys. I think I figured it out. Yeah. So when it comes to tech art pipeline, we build a lot of stuff, again, in-house so that we can, since we all are using Unity, since we all are using Unreal, if we use the same technology, eventually our games will look the same. That's what I believe. So what we do is that we open up Unity in many ways, and we kind of build our own shaders, and we kind of build our own lot of different tools, basically, so that at least in some capacity, the games looks different, and it serves the game's pillar as well. So I'll just show you some of the shader work that we are doing. So this is the character. And if you see our shader, it has a lot of different capabilities that we can do. So this is a custom shader that we wrote for all this thing. So things like, so we can have, like, if someone hits the enemy, right? This is the Fresnel intensity that we can increase and decrease. So this is something that we wrote for the game, because when you hover on things like that, generally people use it for selecting the characters. You can dissolve the item, the hero basically, or the enemy. Apart from that, also we use Amplify Shader Editor for our shader building tool. So this is kind of, I know that right now shader graph is something that everyone uses, but we still are using the Amplify Shader Editor. The shader is not super optimized, but this is kind of how we build our shaders, basically, using the pipeline that we follow. Some of the other things that we do also is, like, for example, UI as a small team, our texturing process, again, we are like 6 people in the studio. So we can't go ahead and detail every single character as much as possible. So what we do is that we have a lot of hack and tricks basically in our tech pipeline to make sure that our cavity maps are used as a highlighter for the characters basically. So we use a lot of that techniques also in texture, which I can't really show you over here, but all those things add up and reduce our pipeline, the time taken to build the characters a lot. That being said, even for UI stuff, I know that a lot of people use, here in India, we use button component basically to build our buttons. But we kind of have our own kind of system. Let me just play the game. So you can see that the UI is coming and going. We are not using anything in the Unity's UI pipeline over here. It's all happening through a custom shader. And let me just show you how that works. For example, let's say you want to hover these icons basically, right? Let me just, yeah, this icon basically. So generally what you would do is that you would take the color layer and you would increase the colors basically in Unity. What we are doing is that we are just going through our shader, and you can do a lot of different stuff through the GPU itself basically. So the artist has to only give us one icon, and automatically the shader takes care of a lot of different UI behavior that needs to be done. So for example, if you want to log this, let's say the item is locked right now, you don't have to build another artwork for this icon, a grayscaled artwork basically. You can just do it through the shader by using the red channel, and you can just flip the red channel, use that as our albedo, and it automatically makes sure that your item is locked right now. So in this case, now you're not exporting two different textures, it's much more optimal. So you just flip this flag over here, and it automatically locks that item basically. Same thing goes for the shine. So you can see that, yeah, you can see that the item is pulsating right now. So again, there is no like a special mask that we are using in Unity, because in Unity, if you don't know the UI hierarchy, basically every time you do a certain update in the hierarchy, it's kind of re-rendering everything. So let's say you have like 100 items in your inventory, and if you move your cursor, and if you do the Unity way of like changing any of the items in the inventory slot, it's going to re-render entire canvas basically. So what we do is that we never mess around with the hierarchy. If you want to enable or disable any of the UI elements, we rather do it through the shader, and the hierarchy is always clean basically, so that there is no problems when it comes to optimization, because this has really been a very big pain point for us when we have ported our games on Switch and things like that. Even when you hover, like you can see the outline that is coming over there. So that's nothing but again a shader value that is being changed. Oh, I can show you it. So this is the hover, this is the hover boxing. So you can see there is no like component that is being turned on or turned off, or things inside. So just wanted to show you how TechArt can help optimize your pipeline in very ways. So here we have already created a game object for our inventory slot. The artist has to just give us the icons, and you slap that in, and now you have like a perfectly running UI inventory system basically. Apart from that, also things like animations and paneling, like the panel animation that you saw here. So we have our own custom editor script that you can see over here. You can easily, let's say the artist, the designer wants to, instead of animating this from top to left, he wants to do it top diagonally, he wants to move it top to left. So I can just go over here, move this over here, and say save position in my target position. And then I can restart my start position over here. I can just play it, and that's it. You don't have to go to any animation panel to do this, or open the code as well. So now my animation is going from left to right. So all these things you can build. So your TechArt pipeline. So because our game is heavily UI specific, it's a turn-based deck builder. So there's a lot of UI stuff that is happening. There's a lot of UI interaction that is happening. So we wanted to optimize as much as possible to make sure that we are able to achieve what we want to achieve, because there's so many UI overlaps that happens in the game. So we made sure that all this thing is taken care of during the vertical slice, and now we are building upon it. So moving back to my slide. Yeah. So some final thoughts before I end my talk. Some suggestions I wanted to give you is that please don't think that if you add more complexity to your pipeline, it will help with your quality. It's actually inverse. So try to figure out what your game's pillar is, and try to make sure that you're avoiding unnecessary complexity, because it can 100% derail your production basically. So your art should be there to serve the game's pillar, rather than inspire, rather than there to impress your friends, or look how good my characters look how good. That's not how it should be. It should be for your game's pillar basically. Second is, aesthetics. Aesthetics is much more important than fidelity. A lot of people think that Yeah, aesthetics is much more better than fidelity, basically. So fidelity is the level of detail. Aesthetics is how beautiful your game looks. So always focus on aesthetics rather than fidelity, so that you can actually finish your game, basically. Advanced tech is not equal to quality. I mean, I know that there are a lot of technology that is available right now, like your meta-human and things like that. But these things do have a tendency to change a lot. And it's very difficult as a small team to support them as well. So right now, yeah, the demo is looking great using those technologies that you're using. Like, you might also feel like, okay, there's no caustics in Unity, right? So let's go to the asset store and take a caustics asset and then slap it on the game. But maybe what will happen is that when you port it to Switch or PlayStation, you'll see that the shader does not support it. Now what will you do, right? So do your background, do your checks, see what your tech stack looks like, make sure that the tech stack aligns with your experience, or else dumb down your game's technology, basically, and make sure that it's again serving the game's pillar. So that's about it. I'm anyways out of time. It's just only 4 minutes. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
We can have a couple of questions if anyone has any. Over there.
Yeah, it was quite nice, man. I just have a small doubt. Like when you showed me the shaders, right? Like with the UI that you did.
Yeah.
I was just curious. Like each icon has a different kind of highlighting or pulsating kind of thing, right? How do you do that with the shader?
So basically, what you do is that in the start method in Unity, you have to create an instance of the material and then slap it, basically. So otherwise, all your materials would be the same, right? So it will share those materials.
No, I understand that, but you need a different mask kind of a thing for each.
You don't need a different mask, basically. You just need different materials, basically. You don't need different masks. The mask is built within the shader itself. So when you apply it on a particular game object, that object is the mask. That diffuse alpha, so let's say there is a ring, basically. The alpha channel of that ring is the mask for that sprite of that UI.
All right, I get it. Like RBG, and you are using AAS.
If you want some more deep this thing, I can after the talk I can come out and I can just open this thing and show you.
All right. Any other question? Seems like no. Jen might be outside, so if someone wants to ask something, we are going to jump to the second session. So thank you so much, Jen, once again.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.